Hello, everybody. Eric here with the penultimate book in the secret history of the world. F. Paul Wilson. This is Signalz by F. Paul Wilson. The Adversary Cycle, a prelude to Night World. So there you go. And this is the book I've been using for the Secret History of the World timeline. But let's talk about this for a minute. As always, do my review and then get into how it ties into everything as much as I can remember, with some, hopefully not too many, but possibly spoilers. So, first of um, all right, not really going to give a nutshell for this. It has to do with the mysterious signals that have been popping up within the Secret History of the World books. A big part of that was in The Last Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. This book follows basically four people. So each chapter is from a different person's point of view, cycling through these four people. And we have, Barbara, and her chapters are in first person. She's telling her story. And technically, we were introduced to her in The Last Christmas, except that, I don't think she was named in that, but she's in a scene in The Last Christmas that's repeated in here, and she was in that book. She's this woman that's at the park with her two daughters when the signal goes off, and one of her daughters is affected, and the character, Tier Hill, now I can't remember, helps her. That scene is repeated in this book. And then we move on with her story and her daughter's story from there. Then we have Ernst Drexler, who's the head of the or not the head, an actuator for the Septimus Order. He's been in a ton of these books, and we follow a bunch of what's going on with him as we're closing in on the end of the world as we know it. And then there's Harry Tate, Hari, a woman. She is a forensic accountant, and she is hired by somebody who's been looking at some of the weird things that the Septimus Order has been doing with stocks and different things. And he needs Harry Tate's opinion on what's going on. And then we have, I think it's Frankie, is what it says. There's Harry, there's Barbara, there's Harry, Frankie. Yeah, so Frankie is an author. He's basically F. Paul Wilson, because he's P. Frank Winslow, and he writes about a guy named Jake, who's an ex-SEAL, I believe, who people hire to fix their problems. But he's been writing these books based on the dreams he has. He has dreams of these events. He writes the books, and it's essentially he's writing Repairman Jack's life. And so he gets involved because his agent is a member of the Septimus Order and brings his latest manuscript to the attention of the Septimus Order, and they're like, that's a little too real for our taste. And so they got to take care of old Frankie. So we're following basically these four main characters, each chapter, again, part of their story. I gave this, for the too long didn't watch crowd, I gave this 4 out of 5. It's your typical, I keep saying typical, fantastic F. Paul Wilson writing with very interesting characters. It moves along at a fast pace, and everything's going to, even though we're following these 4 different people, essentially, it's all going to come together at the end, and it's all building up to the last book, The Night World, or just Night World. And as far as being able to read this, if you've never read any of the other stuff, I mean, again, with all of them, you can. And it's not going to be the worst thing ever, because you still have interesting characters, great writing. But again, it's not going to, you're going to miss so much if you haven't read a bunch of the other books. So 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this, and it's quick. It's a little short thing. So just a really good story. Great characters. I love Harry Tate. She's wonderful. She was in, I can't remember which book she was introduced in, but she's in the Void Protocol, which is one of the Ice novels. And Frankie, P. Frank Winslow, very fun character, essentially the F. Paul Wilson analog. I think that's the right word. He's a very fun, weird, quirky kind of character. The stuff going on with Barbara and her daughter is horrific. It's terrifying. And we get into there's some wild stuff going on here. So really 4 out of 5. Great read. I don't know if you're going to get stuff if you haven't read the other stuff, but it's still a good time. Excuse me. So now let's get into where this ties into everything. And if we look at the official timeline, if anybody's watching one of these videos for the first time, Secret History of the World, a bunch of novels and short stories and everything from F. Paul Wilson that all culminates in a book called Night World. There's a timeline that has the past, which is anything that happened before 3 years prior to the end of the world as we know it. So we have the past, then year 0 minus 3, minus 2 minus 1, and then year 0 is when we reach the end of the world as we know it. Night World is the final story in this whole series, and that takes place in May of year 0, and Signalz also takes place in May of year 0. The previous book, The Dark at the End, was in March. So this really, really ties in to a lot of stuff. As I said, it even has a scene from Last Christmas is repeated in this from Barbara's point of view. And so we're reintroduced to Tier Hill, if that's his name, if I'm remembering that correctly, and introduced really for the first time to, name-wise anyway, to Barbara and her children, her daughters, and the more important, I hate to say it that way, but Ellie is her younger daughter. She's the one that's affected by the signal. And yeah, what happens with Ellie, horrific, but definitely part of bringing about the change that the otherness wants. And then, of course, with Ernst Drexler, we're getting a little spoilery in the last book, the last Repairman Jack book, The Dark at the End. Ernst was very wishy-washy. He's on the side of the otherness, the bad guys essentially, but some stuff goes down, and he kind of teams up with Jack a little bit. But then when things look to be swinging the other way, he goes back to working for the bad guys. And there's some crazy stuff that's going on with him and the Septimus Order and some of the other characters that are members of the Septimus Order. And there's a lot of talk about Wardenclyffe, which is one of the earlier books that I didn't do for this series because I didn't have it when I started the series, and it takes place prior to my earlier videos, and I didn't want to jump around the timeline. So the first book that I had read for this series was The Keep, which takes place in 1941, and Wardenclyffe takes place 1903 to 1906. I do have the book, but I didn't have it at the time to fit it into the timeline properly. So I'm thinking a lot of what is talked about in here takes place in that book. And then, excuse me, with Harry, she starts digging in to what the Septimus Order is up to with this young guy, Donnie. I believe is his name. Yes, Donnie. And he's a fun character. But they dig up some crazy stuff. And he's related to another character from the Repairman Jack books. Russ, I believe, is his brother. And some stuff happened with Russ in Fatal Error. Not the last Repairman Jack, the one before that. So lots of stuff tying together. Just all sorts of shenanigans going on. And it all comes to a head at the end. And I'm trying not to say too much to spoil it, but it ties a lot of people together. A lot of people from, again, we've got a character that's been in the Ice trilogy, and I can't remember what else she was in. Harry Tate being that character. And then characters from the Repairman Jack books. And the adversary books? I'm trying to remember specifically. But so yeah, and it all is leading into, as a matter of fact, I'm just going to grab this because I finally started it. I couldn't decide because I hate to put an end to all of this, but it is the final book. I really wanted to jump into it, but I also wanted to savor it. So Night World is the final book. This says a Repairman Jack novel, the author's definitive edition. This is heavily revised from the original 90s version. And it's a big, thick book. This one is 462 pages. And this absolutely leads into this. As a matter of fact, I'm wondering if there's going to be any crossover scenes. Seems possible to me. But this is supposed to bring together characters from Ice, from the Adversary Cycle, from Repairman Jack, obviously, maybe from some of the other books, but it's all coming together, folks. Very exciting. So that's it. I think I covered everything for Signalz, F. Paul Wilson. I guess I should have mentioned, it's a little late now, so the Signalz, if there's anybody that doesn't know, it's this signal that's popping up in different parts of the world, and only a select few people can hear it. The closer they are to it, the more painful it is. And they're all sort of syncing up to Signal Prime. Little late for me to go into that, but here we go, and I'm not going to re-record this. Signalz, F. Paul Wilson, 4 out of 5 stars. The penultimate book in the secret history of the world. I don't do questions for these videos, so if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post spoiler warning. Try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. And if you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'm still on Twitter at Ronan5757. On Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, it's Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K. ERIKSMITH 5757. And if you're on Blue Sky, I am at EL Smith. That's all I have for you this time. So until next time, read more books.